Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, all Freddie Mercury friends and Queen friends. Today is a very special day. We remember our dear Freddie, and we have here one of the best friends of Freddie and his longtime personal assistant and opera critic and writer, Mr. Peter Freestone. Peter, hello, and say some words about Freddie on this day for Queen community.
Hello. um, this is uh, this is a day where so many people are sad. Um, I usually am the opposite because I think on this day of to celebrate his life,
Mm-hmm.
to think about all the good things that he did, about all the things that he left for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Freddie was never one who wanted to be sad. He never was really a sad person. So I think it's only right that rather than mourning his passing, we celebrate his life.
Yes, because actually he is more than alive. Millions of people still listen to him and still adore him, and
Oh yeah,
he,
and the thing is, if I talk, when I talk to fans, um, and they just I know they just want some sort of reassurance, and I explained to them that Freddie is there for them. If they need him, they just need to talk to him.
hmm
You know, because someone asked me, does Freddie come and spend time with me? In the last years, and I said, well, actually no, because I was lucky enough to spend 12 years with him. He's now got millions of other people he has to spend time with.
yes, yes. And today we have some rare photographs of you and Freddie, and the first one that we see is a picture of Freddie having his haircut done. We see you, a hairdresser, and a couple of girls. Who are these girls, and who is this hairdresser? And do you remember how it happened, when, and where?
I'm trying to think of when and where. Um, because the thing is, just looking at it, I cannot even really tell you exactly what year this was.
Mhm.
Um, but I know it's taken from Music Life magazine,
Yes.
the Japanese magazine.
hmm
But I don't know that it's was taken in Japan, because the two girls are definitely not Japanese,
Yes.
and I don't really think the hairdresser is either.
Yes.
So, I mean, really, it could have been anywhere, but I don't know why. But I get this idea that it could have been South America.
mm. hmm
It's quite possible that it was in South America.
hmm
I mean, where was it done? It looks like it's done in sort of like a TV studio, or no, maybe it is a dressing room. I think maybe it's a dressing room,
hmm
because if you look behind, there's sort of a couch with handbags on it and
hmm
bits and pieces behind him.
hmm
Um, and in front, except the thing is, there's no mirror there, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything.
hmm
I mean, I really cannot give you much more than that.
And what were you presented there all the time while he was having a haircut, or is it just you
Yeah, no,
caught in the moment?
I was there all the time because it was three strangers with him, three
Uh
people
huh.
he didn't really know.
Uh huh.
If there was someone else in the room, if one of the band was in the room, or someone else that Freddie knew, then yes, I could have gone out and done something. But in that he was alone with these three people, then I would be there all the time.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of Freddie's haircuts are your favorite ones? How do you like the best one?
Well, from work point of view, the later ones. Because when I started in 1979, the hair was still, I mean, it wasn't as short as you went. It was still sort of down the back of his neck and sort of longish. And when his hair got wet, it curled. And so during his break, during the guitar solo, for example, he would be backstage and we would be drying his hair to try and get rid of the curls and everything. So for me, it was a lot easier when he just had to put a hairbrush through the hair and everything was finished. 2 or 3 brushes with the hairbrush and his hair was done. Those were the good days.
Yeah, the easiest way to work with the hair.
Oh, yes.
And as you assume and think that this picture may have been taken in South America,
I don't know. I think it's the girls that make me think that. Although the hairdresser also is Latin rather than European.
Yes, and remembering South American days, can you try to remember some new story, maybe how Freddie spent his free time there, how any episode?
The thing is, okay, I mean, one time I remember we were in Rio. There wasn't a show at that point. There was supposed to be, but it was cancelled. And we did Sao Paulo. But we were in Rio for a few days. And Freddie wanted to go out one evening. He just wanted to go out for an evening. And literally he did it once, because for Freddie to go out, there were 3 cars involved because of Freddie, translators, and about 4 security, plus the Freddie and who he was with. He was going out with about 4 people. So 2 cars were for Freddie and 1 person plus security plus translator. Then another car was for me and for the other 2 people going out, and then there was the 3rd car with the rest of the security. And so, I mean, trying to go somewhere quietly for a drink when you have these, it just was impossible. He did it the once, and that was it. From then on, he just stayed in the hotel.
I see. And the second picture we look at is Freddie sort of saying something to you, or it looks like he is asking you something. He's holding something in his hand. Can you try to remember something about this picture, or what could it be that he could have discussed with you in here?
This is 100% Japan.
Yes, we see people. Yeah.
Because the gentleman you see looking towards Freddie is his Japanese bodyguard. It actually looks like a Polaroid photograph in his hand.
Ah, yeah, yeah.
I'm holding a diary. So I think what it is, probably his friend Misa Watanabe had taken a picture of something in a shop, because she knew Freddie very, very well. She was actually the in charge of the publishing company that published the Queen lyrics in Japan, and she was also always there on the tour. And as I say, she was a long-time good friend of Freddie's. So she probably had found something, and we were actually there looking for it. You know, he's got the photograph of what she thinks he wants, and we found the shop, and he will, but he's not 100% sure. You look at his face.
Yes.
And he's pointing somewhere else. Because it's certainly not the shop behind him. Yeah. But you see, that hair was actually, even that hair was longer than he had it in the end. In the end, it was even shorter than that. But yeah, yes, that because that's definitely a Polaroid photo in his hand.
And you say that you hold the diary in your hand. It's like it was you who always kept the diary when you and Freddie traveled. And
yes, because just so that there was no double booking of time or anything, just so if someone says, "Oh, look, we need to press this," and like I look at it and I say, "No, you've already put Freddie down for an interview at this time in this place, so no, he can't do it." That was an incredibly important book. Because the thing is, you have to remember, this is long time before diaries in mobile phones.
Yes. And the third picture, we can see Roger, Freddie discussing something with some guy, and you. What kind of story could it be? Can you try to remember?
Now, Roger is getting, that's in a dressing room. He's getting ready for a show. Definitely. Down the bottom, it looks like, I mean, that's Fred Mandel Freddie's talking to, isn't it?
Maybe. He looks a bit like him, but also he looks a bit not definitely like him. Maybe it could have been him, yes, in some way.
Because I don't know why, but I get the idea that this is Los Angeles, this picture. Because it's sort of similar to, there's photographs with Freddie and Michael Jackson together. And those would be at backstage at the Forum.
Yes.
And so this, I just, with the palm tree and everything back there, and Roger looking young, Freddie young. So it was early 80s, very early 80s. And I'm just sort of hanging around looking important.
Yeah. I think also you're not just looking important, but you also actually was quite important for in every sense. But as you remembered, Freddie and Michael, and as we know that you actually in some way took the part in recording of the song, one of the definitely unreleased yet songs, Victory. We remember you said you were making a rhythm section, knocking on the door, but can you try to remember, was it at least a slow rhythm song or was it a quick one? And
no, I mean it wasn't fast. But I mean it was, because what I had to do, the door, I had to keep slamming it. Opening, closing, open, closing, and it was sort of, let me think. Like that. It wasn't fast, it wasn't slow, it was just in the middle there somewhere. And the other one, the last picture, is in the studio, or is in a studio, isn't it?
I think it is in the backstage because Freddie is making his uh, face look like
Ah, okay,
this.
yes,
Yeah.
and they're just and the Brian and John are tuning up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, okay.
And what
Yeah,
was what?
because you see, sometimes there was a tune-up room
Mm-hmm.
separate, but other times when there weren't enough rooms backstage, the dressing room, they had to put the guitar tuning up in the dressing room.
Mm-hmm.
Not very often, not very often.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, because the back wood paneling looks the same with Roger getting dressed and with them tuning up.
Yeah, so it's probably taken in the same place at the same
Yes.
time.
Yeah. It's just this other picture,
Mm.
because it's a different Roger, definitely a different Roger. You know what I mean? You look
Mm-hmm.
at the picture of Roger in the lower one, and his
Mm-hmm.
hair is brushed across and straight and everything like that. But
Mm-hmm.
with the top photograph, he's got his hair all over everywhere. And the thing is, he would not make such a big change.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I think that the second photograph is taken at a different time from 1 and 3.
Mm-hmm. And the next picture, I think, is one of the most interesting that we see is uh, backstage, and you seem to discuss something together with Brian and Paul Prenter. What could it have been?
Oof, who knows? You see, also, I can tell you at this point, I was actually working specifically for Freddie, because Tony Williams is in the background, who took over looking after all the clothes.
Uh-huh.
What is that Brian's got in his hand? Is it like a box or?
Something like this. Maybe it could have been a photographic camera or something
It
like
might.
that.
Maybe it was one of his sort of not stereo cameras, but one of the old cameras that he had. Because I know sometimes he brought the old stuff with him,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not wide enough to be a stereo camera.
Mm-hmm.
And there's Trip in there because they're obviously talking about the show.
Yeah.
So yeah, another dressing room. But this one is Japan, isn't it? Because there's Japanese poster above
Uh-huh.
Tony
Definitely.
Williams' head.
Yes, definitely. Oh, yeah. And what are these white lines that are in front of Freddy? Two white lines.
It looks like, I mean, not a tie as such, but something
Mm-hmm.
like that, because you see it goes around his neck. It
Mm-hmm.
goes up
Mm-hmm.
on the t-shirt
Yeah.
over his right shoulder. You
Mm-hmm.
don't see it on the left side because it goes into the white t-shirt, but you can actually see it. I mean, it looks something like a tie, or maybe it's one of those, a belt for one of the hakatas, I don't know. Those thin cotton dressing gowns.
Mm-hmm.
It might be a tie for one of that, a waist tie for one of those.
Mm-hmm. I see. And the next picture, we see you and Freddy near the bookshop. It looks again like Japan, and Freddy is in the same kind of wearing style, the same
He's wearing the
t-shirt.
same thing as he did in the first one of him shopping.
Yes, yes. And can you try to remember some story about this picture? Maybe it looks like you've been walking quite a lot during this day.
Yeah, I can almost promise you that we did not go into that shop.
Yeah.
Um, but no, in fact, Freddie did like walking in Japan, because the thing is, the fans in Japan were always very respectful. Because they saw Freddie with his security guy, who was the same person every single time Freddie went, because again, Freddie trusted him. Freddie knew he was safe with him, and the fans would almost go across the road if Freddie was walking down the street. But they would follow, but maybe 20 meters away. And there would be a group of them following us around, but they always left him alone. They never came jumping, asking for photographs or signatures or anything. Freddie enjoyed walking the streets of Japan, and it didn't matter which city it was, because he got specific things from so many different cities. Something he would get in Nagasaki that he wouldn't get in Osaka, that sort of thing. So he knew exactly what he was going for, exactly what he was going out for.
I see. And the next rare picture is you doing massage to Roger on his shoulders. Can you try to remember this?
Yeah, it wasn't just only this time. Just every now and then, Roger really felt tight across the back of his neck. And this was between sound check and the show. So during the sound check, he would feel himself tightening up across his shoulders. And so he would ask, would I sort of help him out a little bit? So, happily I would just, work on his shoulders. If it helped, why not? But as I say, this wasn't unique. This happened a few times. But again, if you look, you see the hair is the same as that when he in the dressing room where the tuning room is.
Yes.
There's that photograph above with Roger. That's the same hairstyle.
So it could also have been taken on the same day, probably.
Yes, probably.
And if you try to remember, what is the first memory, maybe the most joyful and unusual, and the one that you haven't talked about yet, about Freddie and Roger together? Some story, some situation. You sound like you're making a rhythm exactly like Roger on drums.
There was always something that they would find to laugh about. And that was something that was both that's one of the things I think that really connected Roger and Freddie, because they were always ready to find something to smile about. They spent much more time happy than angry or sad, or because smiling and laughing made them feel so much better. They really understood that life is too short to go around being miserable. There was just far too much in life to be happy about, particularly in their lives. They'd worked very, very hard, and they'd got what they wanted. And so what was there to be sad about?
Yes. And you say that you remember at least two stories. The one is about Great Pretender, and what?
Well, the other one, of course, was I Want to Break Free. When again it was Roger and Freddie who always found the funny side of it. I suppose because both of them were the younger generation in the video, you know. If you look, that Brian was the older lady, and John was the old lady, and it was up to Freddie and Roger to bring the youth into it. Again, you know, it's just that they had that similar characteristic. They both were prepared to smile.
The picture from Freddie's 39th birthday, living on my own Munich birthday, and we see Jim, you and Freddie. And can you try to remember maybe how was it organized by yourself? Your costume? How did you prepare it? Because you look quite special and interesting.
Well, I actually got someone at the Royal Opera House to make it for me.
Right.
I knew what I wanted because it had to be black and white and a dress and everything. So I knew what I wanted, but there was absolutely no way I could make it. So I rang up friends of mine at the Opera House to see if there was someone there who would be able to do it for me. And they did. They actually put it all together. I've actually got a photograph. I saw it the other day of me standing, and it's a full-length photograph because with these things you don't see the bottom half of me. And it's this big, it's a skirt with black satin on top, but underneath there's a lot of, you know, like the ballet tutus, you have that netting you know, there's 11 sort of layers of netting to make the tutu, and I've got about 5 or 6 layers of netting underneath the black skirt, so that it's a real, comes out sort of quite a lot at the bottom. Yeah, I was quite impressed with what they came up with. Again, that's something borrowed. I mean, it could have been a wedding, something borrowed, something blue, you know, something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. I've got the blue eyeshadow. Yeah. Anyway, no, again, it was just borrowed from somebody. They actually, if I remember rightly, it was borrowed from one of the performers at Henderson's. You know, because they did drag shows there. And I remember from one fashion, I had this silver outfit that I borrowed from one of the dancers at Henderson's. And I think it was from the same guy that I got this wig. I borrowed the wig.
I see.
It's strange because I didn't know these existed. But it's good. I'm really happy to see Joe like this. You know, you look at him and he's smiling and he's happy.
Yes.
And that's wonderful for me.
And maybe you remember or know the story how Joe prepared his costume.
That I cannot. I really don't, because he kept everything very quiet because he didn't want people to know what he was going to do. And I mean, when he did turn up wearing his costume, it was wonderful. Because there was so little to it.
Yes. And in the current times, when you remember Freddie's 39 big birthday, Munich, living on my own party, what is maybe the new story or episode that you remember that you haven't remembered before but remember now? At least how the party started. What was the very start of the party?
Um, I think the thing is, we actually turned up maybe half an hour after it had started.
Mm.
We were not the first people to arrive. Freddie was not the first one there to welcome all the guests. It
Mhm.
wasn't going to be a party like that. It was a party,
Mhm.
and Freddie would be part of it.
Mhm.
So, and for that, it had already got half the people there.
Mhm.
But then from then on, I mean, Freddie was there basically, welcoming everybody because he
Mhm.
knew most of them. He
Mhm.
knew most of the people there. Also, don't forget, there were a few people who came from England,
Yeah.
because I think Steve Strange was there as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was there as far as I remember.
Um, so, I mean, Freddie was there when the English contingent arrived.
Uh-huh.
But then that's when, not long after that, I mean, within maybe an hour, hour and a half after that, was when somebody spiked Freddie's drink.
Mm. Mhm.
Things just got very serious from there.
Mm. But then he got over it and he felt better at some time.
Not really. I mean, he was there, but again, I don't think he stayed to the end. I know we didn't, just couldn't. But I don't think he stayed to the end. He went home. Because the thing is, I don't know what they'd put in his drink, but you can actually see it. There's some footage of him going for the cake, to cut the cake and everything, and you can see he's not 100% there. And the cutting of the cake was brought forward because he wasn't well, so that he could do the cake, and if he felt like it, he could go home straight after that.
Yes, and if we remember birthdays, can you please try to remember even maybe not the very first birthday, but at least one of the first birthday, your birthday that you celebrated already with Freddie, working with him, and maybe a present that he gave
I
you.
suppose the first one that I really think about was in New York in 1981.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I didn't think he would remember it was my birthday, but he got up and we sorted out his breakfast. We were in a hotel. We were in the Berkshire Place, which was on East 52nd Street.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he got up and it was fine. He had his breakfast. He says, "Okay, fine. We're going to go out shopping now." He says, "Oh, okay. Do you want me to organize the car? Sort out, No, 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 no. I know exactly what I want, where I'm going, and we can walk. It's fine." And I thought to myself, but Freddie doesn't like walking, so I suppose it can't be too far.
Mm-hmm.
And we left the hotel, and we literally went down the block from to I don't know if it was Fifth Avenue. Yeah, I think it was Fifth Avenue to Fifth
Mm-hmm.
Avenue. Fifth Avenue and 52nd Street on the corner was Cartier.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just, as I say, literally walked across the road and down the block and into the shop we went. He says, "Okay, I know it's your birthday, so we're going to get you a birthday present." And he already had in mind what he wanted to get me, because he says, I don't see you wearing jewelry. You should have something. You should have something. And he he had in the past, he says, I know exactly what I want to get you. It's this bracelet. It's gold and onyx. He says, it's absolutely wonderful. I've had 3 of them. And I said, but hang on, why did you have 3? He says, oh, because you've got to be very, very careful, because if you hit the link, and the onyx link, if you hit it on something, it cracks, smashes, and you lose the bracelet. So I said, okay, great. That's all I need. I suppose luckily they did not have any. They just didn't have any in stock. And so he was sort of looking around, and he found this other gold. It's like a ring, in fact, but it comes apart into 2 parts. There's a screw each side, and you take the screws out and it comes apart. And he said, no, I think this looks just right. This looks perfect. And so he got the, the salesman to put one on my wrist and screw it up and everything. And he says, yeah, that's perfect. This is it. This is your birthday. Happy birthday. So then we got the box and the little screwdriver that went with it. And we went to pay. And then they gave him the bill, and it was something in the region of $4,000. He looked at it. He said, I wasn't going to spend that much on you. But that's okay. You're worth it. And I just felt so amazing. It just felt so amazing.
And speaking about New York and America in general, have you noticed after some time of Freddie living there, did he in some way approach New York behavior or New York mentality into his character, or something from American style?
Yes, very, very much so. Mainly, I mean, he sort of fell in love with New York, I think, in about 1978. And he would spend all his spare time there. He just loved the New York scene, the bars, the music, the discos, everything. It just was him at that time. It also was what made him, you see him wearing the leather cap and the shiny PVC outfit he had on with those panels on the back of it that sort of, I can't remember, they're not holograms, but they're sort of similar to holograms on this. He wore it for the 78, 79 tour. That whole thing came from New York. The moustache came from New York. And he was convinced whenever he was in America, he always tried to put on sort of an American accent. But it never quite worked because his voice was too particularly British. So he could never quite make that American.
In what ways could he, if you can try to show it or explain it, how did he try to sound like more?
Well, the thing is, how it was described by an American was that it was very, very specifically mid-Atlantic because it was using American words and American phrases, but with an English accent, with it just very, very slightly different, slanting towards Americans. So it's sort of like he was flying from London to New York, and he sort of picked up a little bit of American as he was landing. But there was so much, very much British there that he could not bury.
I see. And if we try to remember his appearance, the last one on Brit Awards in 1990, what is the story of his so much unusual costume, this blue costume that he wears, and white scarf? Do you remember him on this day? Were you with the group when they celebrated 20 years in club with
Yes,
again
yes,
George?
I was there. I was
Mm.
there. Well, the thing is, he had started in the last sort of 3 years.
Mm.
No, actually, from 1987, when he was going to be doing things with Montserrat, he wanted to be able to dress properly.
Mm.
So he had Diana Mosley find a designer who would make some suits for him. He had about 4 or 5 different suits.
Mhm.
And this pale blue one was one of them. He just loved that color.
Mhm.
And the thing is, when he did that thing, he knew he was not looking good. So he didn't want people to think he was sort of pretending, trying to cover something up. So he thought, I will put this on. So people, maybe they will look at the suit rather than they will look at me. So he he had the blue suit, he had the scarf. He was looking like a real gentleman, which is what he always had been to me. Right from the very first time I met him, he was a real gentleman. And he just liked wearing suits in the end. They made him feel better. Because you have to remember, his jeans, t-shirts, leather jacket image, and was what he used to do when he could go out to bars every night. And I suppose those clothes just reminded him of what he couldn't do anymore, what he didn't do anymore. And that's why he just got into wearing suits. He wore them quite often when he was going out, rather than his trademark, blue jeans, leather jacket. There are some amazing pictures of Freddie. And that's what people should remember on the 24th, on every 24th. Just remember Freddie enjoying himself. And you have to also remember the courage and bravery of that man over the last 4.5 years of his life, who just carried on and carried on and carried on. He was, and he never complained, not once, not once. And as I say, you look at this video, you look at so many things with Freddie. Even some of his interviews where he's laughing so much, but you can see him enjoying himself. And that's why I always try to have in my mind that we are celebrating his life rather than mourning his loss.
Right. Even in this, it goes with Freddie saying the bigger the better, because during the year we celebrate his life twice.
Yes. And so that's how it should be, because okay, I will admit that if he had not written, if he wasn't who he was, if he hadn't written songs, if he hadn't performed, if he was not the person that he was, then you can be sort of sad that he's gone. But he worked incredibly hard to give us what we do have. So we have to say thank you. and
Yes,
thank him for being who he was and what he was.